Hi, welcome to Science Sundays. It's a beautiful spring day. Glad to have you all here. The whole point of Science Sundays is that knowledge unshared is like knowledge undiscovered. And all of us faculty here are trying to push the boundaries of discovery in our research, and we share those results with each other in conferences and other things like that. And then we share with our students through our teaching, and then we share with you and other interested people on YouTube in events like this. And today we're delighted to have a special guest who's actually focused on making science accessible. But I'm going to begin by introducing the person who's going to introduce the speaker. I'm going to introduce Professor Catherine Campbell-Kibler from the Department of Linguistics, who will introduce our speaker. Thanks.
Okay. Hi, so I'm very excited to get the chance to introduce Laura Wagner to you all. She's a full professor in the Department of Psychology here at OSU, and she's also courtesy faculty in linguistics, although I personally feel that that title drastically understates the degree to which we feel like she's one of ours. Her CV's on her website, so if you're really interested in all the details of the publications and the awards and the grants that she's gotten, and there are many, you can check there. I would rather explain why I thought she should come and talk to you guys today, which is, this is exciting. She's already embarrassed and I haven't even said anything. It's all going to be really nice. So Laura has a number of research programs, but her longest standing is one that explores how children learn verbal aspect. Verbal aspect is those weird details of verbs. So for example, if I say I knit a pair of mittens, you figure out that the mittens are done, right? And if I want to say like I was working on them or something like that, or I want to specify that they're not done, I have to do extra work, right? So it turns out that telling people that you work on verbal aspect is a great diagnostic test for whether someone either is already a linguist or should really think about becoming a linguist. Because for some of us, I say that stuff and you say, that's fascinating. I am very excited about the idea of whether you knit mittens means that the mittens are done. If that's you, come and talk to us after the talk. We're all over there, right? But for a lot of folks, they're like, well, that's odd, but you do you, right? So as an academic with those kinds of interests, there's a few directions you could go with that. One is you could just only talk to other linguists, and there are plenty of us that go that route, right? One is you could lean into the parts that sound normal for other people. Like, well, I'm interested in how children learn language. Everybody thinks that one's cool, right? Or you could take the trouble to figure out how do I talk to people and help them figure out why the stuff that I find interesting is interesting in a broader sense, right? And Noah's dedication to going in that direction has now landed her with the executive directorship of the Buckeye Language Network Language Science Research Lab, which is a mouthful for the place that we call the Pod on the second floor of COSI. If you haven't been there, stop by. It's very cool. Laura has been wrangling deans and museum personnel and reporting all the cool things we do and making sure that we're stocked with staples and not stickers anymore, because we're not allowed stickers anymore, and doing all of that groundwork, as well as being the beating heart of our outreach mission at that lab, figuring out what kinds of experiences and examples will grab people and make them be thrilled to learn a little bit more about language and how their own minds work, and teaching students how they can maintain that ability to talk to regular people as their own knowledge deepens over time. So she's been an inspiration to me since she started that work, and I've been lucky to do some of it with her. And so I thought maybe she might be an inspiration to you guys. So I will yield to Laura now.
Ooh, very bright. It's on, we're good? Okay. So that was a lovely introduction. Thank you, Catherine. She's basically given my talk now, so you could probably just go. But I was going to thank Catherine also because she's the one who suggested me for this, and this is a really exciting place to get to give a talk. I got to do talk with lovely people. John, you've been great. Getting to do the podcast with David was terrific as well. So this is a cool group to be, cool thing to be a part of. So I really appreciate getting to be here. I'm going to talk about how to change the way that people think about science, and here we go. Let's start by talking about what you might think of science is. So when I say I'm going to talk about science, you might be thinking robotics or chemistry or biology or astronomy. You might be thinking one of those big sciences. These are all great examples of traditional scientific fields that are out there. When I say that I want to change things, though, you might also be thinking that I'm going to talk to you about things like people who believe the earth is flat, or people who are anti-vaxxers, or just the whole idea we have right now that lots of people think that scientists, are not trustworthy. We're sort of the mad scientist types. You might be thinking, I want to change this kind of thing. Fact of the matter is, I want to change both of those things. So I want to change what makes people, what people think makes something a science in the first place, and I want to change how much we trust scientists who do that. So, here we go. Let's start with the first one because that's probably the one that is not quite where you expected me to go. I really do want to change what makes you think something is a science. So for a lot of people, when you think about a science, you think about fields, or you think about discoveries, or you think about innovations, or you think about facts, sort of static things that are out there that we know. And that's great, that's part of science, but that's not what makes something a science. What makes something a science is the circle that you learned in 7th grade, right? It's the scientific method. It's the fact that there's a method that we all use, right? And the method, crucially, is one where you have a theory, you make predictions about the world, you get evidence from the world, and you take that evidence seriously, and you use it, right, to refine your theory. This feeds right into the trust question a little bit, because one of the things that sometimes people feel like makes scientists untrustworthy is that we change our minds. But the thing is, of course we change our minds. We are responsible to the evidence that gets presented to us. And if the evidence says change your mind, then we do, right? It's a method. It's not a set of static facts. It's how we get them. So this is going to be an important part of how I want people to think about science as opposed to just thinking of those fields. But the other reason this matters a lot to me is much more personal, and Catherine already alluded to it, right? Which is that there are lots of things in this world that you can study in this manner that people don't traditionally think that you can, and I happen to study one of them, and it's linguistics. So you can study how language works using the scientific method. And we call ourselves language scientists when they do that because we are actually interested in having a theory, making predictions about the world, using the evidence to change the way we think about things. So thinking about science as a method is also a way to sort of expand the range of things that get to count as being a science, including the thing I happen to study. All right. The part about wanting to change how people trust scientists, this one's easy, right? Because trust in science is important for societal reasons. Right? Scientists actually, we have a method that we also know a lot of things that we've learned using that method that are pretty reliable. And it would be nice if our expertise were recognized and people were willing to use our best evidence-based knowledge to inform their decisions at a societal level. So, right, should you get a vaccine? Yeah, probably. Is the earth flat? No. No, it's not. Right? So these are things that scientists have shown, and it'd be nice if we trusted scientists to tell you that. In the domain of language science, we also have things like this. So is phonics important for learning how to read? Yeah, actually it is. That's what the evidence says. Does someone's accent tell you how smart they are? No, it does not tell you that at all. Is it okay to raise your child bilingually? Very good. Okay, so we're on board that one. All right, I'd like to hear it. I feel like language scientists have gotten some traction then. Right, so these are the kinds of societal issues that like we as language scientists feel like we have important things to say to people, and it would be nice if people trusted us to do that. Now, this sounds like a downer right now, like, oh, we're all worried about trust in science. So I want to actually move to some good news. right? So there have been a number of large-scale studies that have looked at trust in science. These are things where you interview hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. I'm going to talk mostly about one that came out 2 years ago. It's a transnational study, so these are people all over the world, lots of different countries, lots of things going on, and they ask them the typical sorts of questions about, do you believe scientists? Do you trust them? Do you trust them to do good things? How do you feel about that? Who are you? And what they find is that on the whole, people trust scientists. This isn't that surprising if you think about the fact that actually science has been really successful overall at doing a lot of things, and people have recognized that. So we do trust science in a general sense. We're not working from a position of weakness, we're working from a position of strength, right? People do in general trust science. However, it is not the case that all people trust scientists equally. In fact, there are some very own differences. So for example, how much you trust scientists depends on your level of education. So people with higher levels of education tend to trust scientists more than people with lower levels of education. There are some political party aspects to this. So people from certain political persuasions trust science less than people from other political persuasions. So this is where you really get the problem, right? There are definitely pockets of people where trust in science is substantially lower. Now, this kind of data is actually very depressing for someone like me because I don't actually feel like I have the resources to fundamentally change how much education people in the world get, or frankly, what the political affiliations are. I mean, I wish I could, but that's not an easy thing for me to really deal with. So what I am very excited about is another finding from this study, which is that how much you trust a scientist depends on how much that scientist connects with people outside of the ivory tower. In this particular study, they called it scientific activism, but it encompasses a wide range of things, all different ways that scientists write letters to the newspaper or talk to people in public or do all sorts of things, all of which involve actual people who are not in the academy. Right? So if scientists do that more, the scientists who do that more are more trustworthy. People trust those people more than scientists who do not go and talk to people in the public. Now this is nice because this feels like something I can deal with. I feel like this is a problem I can actually be useful in. I do want to include that there are plenty of scientists who do this, right? So Bill Nye, the science guy, right? He's great. He's awesome. He does this. Alan Milko-Viro, right? Frederick Berkeley. He is the CEO of COSI, and he's got Dr. B and me, and he does a lot of this kind of work as well. He's lovely. Gretchen McCullough is over there. If you're interested in language science, she's a terrific language science communicator, and her book, Because Internet, is terrific. So these are people who actually do spend a lot of their life communicating about science to people. But you know what? This is not something we should be leaving to the celebrities. I mean, lovely people all, but this is actually a job for all scientists. Right? We're all responsible for talking to people about the science that we do. Oh, can people not read the caption? Right? It says, sometimes I wonder if there's more to life than just unlocking the mysteries of the universe. Right? So this is here to answer the question about, so why don't all scientists talk to the public all the time? And this is really the answer, right? Because our training isn't like that. Our training is be in the lab, do the questions, get involved with the debates. It's fun to play with the test tubes. But we like our science, right? That's why we got into it, is because we like doing the scientific part. And to be honest, talking to the public is not a part of the traditional science curriculum. We don't usually do that. Most of us have never been trained to do that. That's not something that is part of what they think you have to learn when you have to learn how to be a scientist. Our lack of training shows, right? On the whole, scientists are not great at this. So here's some more data. This comes from the Pew Research Center. And again, more big studies. And if you ask people, this is all Americans this time, are scientists intelligent? The answer is yeah. Cool, right? We are smart people, and people believe that, and that's nice. It's very gratifying to hear that the general public thinks that scientists are smart. Are we good communicators? Oh, ouch, right? I mean, not nearly as good, right? So the general public perceives scientists as very, very smart and not particularly good at talking to people. But if you combine that with the trust data, what you find out is that means that we're not that trustworthy either, because it's the being able to communicate well and it's the being able to connect with people that is actually increasing trust in science. So we're not training people to do that. So that would be the big thing that I think that I'm trying to do here is, if we're going to change the way people think about science, how are we going to do that? And the answer is, we are going to train scientists, and to be perfectly honest, scientists to be, who are the easier people to train, which we are students, how to communicate to the general public in ways that are effective, right? So we want them to do accessible, effective science communication. That's how we solve all of these problems. That's how we're going to get people to think about science differently. That's how we're going to get them to trust scientists, is by training scientists to actually talk to people. That's the general goal. What's the right way to do that? Right? So how do you get people to talk to people? And what's the magic ingredient? It turns out there actually is a magic ingredient to doing really good, effective science communication, and it's one word, and it's this word. It's respect. You need to respect the people you are talking with in order to be an effective communicator with them. If you can't respect the people you're talking with and you can't show that respect and they don't feel that respect, you're not going to be very effective at talking to them. So this would be, in one word, what are we supposed to do? But I appreciate that this one word is not a particularly useful piece of concrete guidance. Right, show respect, great. How do you do that? There are many ways that you can do this. I'm going to focus on the two that we really focus on in our training programs, and they're pretty important. And that's this. We've got, you are going to find and use people's funds of knowledge, and you're going to generate interest and excitement. These are two things that are foundational to genuinely showing respect to people when you're trying to communicate with them, especially about a topic like science. Let's unpack that. Funds of knowledge. The model that most scientists, and I'll be honest, most people have when they want to communicate the information to people is they take what's called the deficit model. So think money, right? A deficit means that you lack something, right? You lack funds. And here am I, I'm the expert, this is my attitude. I've got knowledge, you don't, you lack something. Here I am giving you my knowledge. Aren't I a lovely person, right? This is the way that the deficit model works, is that you have to trust me as the expert to just hand it out, and you're going to take it. On the face of it, sounds like a perfectly reasonable model for how you should talk to people. Turns out it's not a very effective model for actually convincing people of anything. And it's not convincing because people are not blank slates. People know stuff. Right? So people have lifetimes of experience that you are going to have to respond to. They're not empty. They also have people that they have been learning from for their entire lives, who are established, trustworthy figures in their life. Their families, their parents, their clergy, their second grade teachers, right? We're all actually living with what our elementary school teachers taught us about a lot of things. But these are all things that people have already got. So you're not just throwing your knowledge onto something that is empty or blank, you're throwing it onto all of this. You need to respect all of this stuff that people already know if you're going to actually make your stuff stick. Now, we really like economic metaphors in this area. If you don't have a deficit, then you must have funds, right? So instead of thinking of people as having empty wallets that are ready to be filled by my beautiful knowledge. Instead, we should be thinking of people as having funds of knowledge already. They have full wallets full of all kinds of stuff. And the job that you want to do here is to fit your stuff into their wallet, right? You want to figure out how you can get your stuff, for them to make a little bit of room for your stuff to go in there and find a place where your stuff can connect to the things that they already have. They have stuff in there. It's not empty. Now, I grant you that this part I've been extremely abstract, and that's actually a no-no for science communication, is to stay abstract this long, so I apologize. So we're going to get concrete for a hot second. I'm going to give you an example. I am a language scientist, and so I study language. I'm going to give you an example from language, and I'm going to try to explain it to you First, I'll explain it to you in the bad deficit model way, and then I'll explain it to you the good, happy, funds of knowledge way, and we'll see how we do. So let's start with this. This is what I'm going to talk to you about. Okay, so we have heard of 6-7, right? We all know what this is. Right, so I'm going to go on a limb and suggest this. We have to think about how you feel about this on a scale from like awful to awesome. Are we more awful? Say a little bit on the office side. Thank you for owning up to it. I was figuring, and I did do my due diligence. I went to the internet. What you can get, I hate 6-7 T-shirts. You can find TikToks telling us that we're doomed. Let's see, it's a plug. It's brain rot. Well, is this resonating for anybody? We're feeling like it's more or less where you're at with the 6-7 kind of a thing. Okay, good. So we're on the same page. All right, now I'm gonna put my language scientist hat on here, and I'm gonna tell you a little bit how I think about 6-7. Spoiler alert, I think it's pretty awesome, right? Just so we know where this is gonna go. First, let me see if I can convince you about this from a deficit model kind of perspective, okay? Here we go. So from a deficit model, let me start by telling you I have a PhD in linguistics. I'm a trustworthy expert. But what you should know about 6-7 is that, basically, it's a normal part of language usage, people. It's the kind of thing that kids have always done. Kids always make slang. It's a way for them to establish their identity. Chill. Be good? Right? Is everybody totally convinced that 6-7 is now awesome? No. Color me shocked. All right, let me try this again from a perspective that I think might be a tiny bit more convincing. Well, I'm going to take your funds of knowledge into consideration. Now, funds of knowledge mean that I actually have to care a little bit more about you. This is actually a fun game. Like, go online and find gifs of 6-7. So if we're going to do the funds of knowledge, I have to start by finding out what you have in your wallet. So why don't you like it? Are you feeling like it's exclusionary? Do you feel like the kids are thumbing their nose at you? Do you feel like it's just meaningless junk that's out there that kids are doing for no good reason? I say, right, people do our, okay, fair. All right, that's all true. The exclusionary thing is a big thing for this kind of thing, right? The feeling like those snarky kids and they're, leaving me out kind of thing. That's definitely the way people feel. How about thinking about this a little bit? Why do you think the kids are doing it? Right? Are they doing it to be? Are they doing it because, I don't know, because they're kids trying to show that they're in a friendship group and that they're kids and you're adults? Right? There's this right, this identity thing that's going on here, right? Where, they're not you, they're wrong, they've got friends. It turns out that this is actually a cool thing that language does. Language is used to communicate all kinds of ideas. I'm using it for a lot of complex ideas right here. But it's also used to tell you a lot about who you are, where you're from, who your friends are, who you feel connected to, right? It's an identity thing, right? It's a little bit like the clothes you wear. Kids also wear funny clothes. Right? So it's an identity thing that we've got going on with this. And having special words that you use and special phrases is part of how we establish our identity group. The kids do it, kids famously do it. But other people do it too. Surfers have their thing. Scientists have theirs, right? We've all got our fun little special terms that we like to use. And on the plus side, that's great for our identity, and it's great for making us feel connected to each other, and it's great for us being able to pick each other out in the crowd. We talk the talk. On the flip side, though, it's kind of exclusionary, and it sucks to be excluded if you're the person who's being excluded from it, right? Right. But if you're identifying your little in-group, you're also implicitly casting some people on the outside. So part of what's going on in 6-7, right, is that they use it to connect themselves, and they use it against the people on the outside. Now, if it makes you feel a little bit better, this isn't new. right? So that you can all come up with some words from your own childhood that you use that your parents didn't like. Depends what your age is, right? You know, I mean, you could be Rod, right? I mean, I actually Googled this online, like what's the cool slang from different decades, you know, are you a keep on trucking kind of person, right? Right, that's slang. I don't think anybody's old enough here to be into hotsy totsy or the bee's knees, right? But that was some pretty edgy slang in the 1920s, people. Nobody's liking that kind of talk. Right, so kids have always done this, have come up with ways to talk that are going to identify them as an in-group and keep the grown-ups as an out-group. And again, if it really want Euro wrestling to make you feel better, be aware that those kids are going to grow up and then the next generation is going to do it to them. Right? It's not going to be 6-7 forever. It never is. So the question is, how are you feeling about 6-7 now? Right? Is it ruining the language? Is it okay if the kids are doing it? On a scale from awful to awesome, you guys were a little bit on the awful side to start with. My sincere, profound hope, like I say, I'm all the way on the awesome side. Happy to discuss all the reasons I think 6-7 is totally cool, not least the gesture. But I hope that I moved you there, right? It is actually not my goal in this little talk here to get you all the way to where I am. We're not handing out degrees in anything. I just want to get you to be a tiny bit less awful, a little bit more towards where I am after something like this. That's essential to the funds of knowledge approach, right? If you already come with a lot of information, you're not going to throw it all out just because I told you something, even if I tell it to you in a nice way. You still have to fit into what you've got. So all I'm trying to do is move you a little bit, because that's part of the funds of knowledge approach, is to actually work with you and to recognize that we're all in this together. So hopefully this much of a change. All right. So much for funds of knowledge. What else have I got? Generating interest and excitement is my other big pillar for respect. Hopefully, I did that a little bit. I did choose the example 6-7 for a reason. I thought it would be funny. I thought you might find it amusing. I thought it might interest you. That's why I picked it, right? I mean, as Catherine points out, I could have picked a lovely example about telicity if you wanted to hear about verbal morphology and the detailed ways in which children acquire it or that it is processed. But I kind of thought that maybe you would be less interested in that overall, though, you know, the hot slang that the kids are saying these days. Interest and excitement is really important for respect, and it's really important for your science communication because it's going to make people happy, right? Happy people will stick with you longer. Happy people will listen to what you have to say. So if your goal is to get people to pay attention to you, making them happy is a good way to do that. Making them sad and angry is not a good way to get people to stick with you. Make them happy. It's also the case, and this comes from a wealth of research actually in psychology, that if people feel positively towards you, they're going to remember that in positive emotion over the long term. Turns out people are very bad about remembering lots of details about things, right? So you may not remembering a single specific thing that I said, but if you enjoyed the talk, you will remember positively the overall messaging, right? The big picture kind of fell. So keeping things positive is a really important part of getting people to actually want to believe you long term and want to like reconnect with you and want to stay interested in what you've got. There's also another reason, which is about you as a communicator, about why this is so important. If you are trying to generate interest and excitement, it means that you have to start not by thinking about what you think is the coolest thing in the world. You have to actually start by thinking about what other people might think is the coolest thing in the world. It forces you to put someone else at the center of your experience, right? So you move to them. So you've got to actually think a lot about how other people might respond to something. So generating interest and excitement is a way to actually refocus the conversation away from you and towards other people. Plus, I mean, fundamentally, it's really a lot more respectful to just not bore people, right? Boring people is not a respectful thing to do. If you are in a classroom where you've been bored to tears, you know, but it is not, people don't care for that, right? People feel disrespected by having their time stolen from them for something they didn't even enjoy. So we try not to do that. This has been theory. Talked to you about theory. I gave you a nice example, talked to you about theory, but I want to talk to you more specifically about where I really do it. And so Catherine already gave me my big Leo, right? So where we do this is at the Language Pod, which, as she very correctly got, is in fact the Language Sciences Research Lab at COSI. We're run by the Buckeye Language Network. I can keep throwing acronyms at you forever. This is the Ohio State University. We love having lots of people involved. We are located inside the COSI Museum. My chess piece, most people have been to the COSI Museum downtown. It's wonderful. Great Pixar exhibit right now. You should, go check it out. And as Catherine mentioned, on the second floor, we are this. We are a giant glass room where we do research, and we are basically the monkeys at the zoo doing research. You can come and watch us, see what real research looks like. And if you're interested and it's the right area and you're the right age for one of our studies, we might ask you to be a participant in our research, because that's basically the first mission of the lab. We're a working research lab. We collect data. There's actually a lot of us collecting data. I have a contingency over here of people who collect data, right? So from multiple departments, psychology, linguistics, speech and hearing science, computer science, we collect data here, just like we would our research lab on campus, only we do it at COSI, and we do it with the museum visitors as our participants. But it's not like being on campus, really, because it is at COSI. And because it's at COSI, we're an exhibit, right? So from the perspective of the visitor to COSI, we're right up there, we're down the road from Progress. We're up the stairs from Oceans, right? We're just one more cool COSI adventure that you can have. So as an exhibit, we have an additional set of responsibilities to actually engage with the public. So we are not just a research lab. We are also a center for public engagement. And we are also, as part of that, a center for training students to do public engagement. That's one of the big things that we do there. It's better than that, I promise. When we think about public engagement, right, part of public engagement, I'll be honest, does come through the research, right? So if you've never done a research study before, on campus, right, people, way often, you do your research study and you get out. At COSI, though, we actually want people to understand what we're doing and why, right? We want them to understand what science is. We want them to understand that there's a scientific method, right, and that we had a hypothesis, and that here you are helping us collect evidence for it, and, we can let you know if it worked out. But we want people to understand that we're part of that methodological process. In addition, that we also have a whole bunch of things that we do that are just straight up engaging with the public, because there's a lot of people that go to COSI, and we can't possibly run them all in experiments. So we run a lot more people just through educational activities. Our goal overall basically is this. We want people to understand that language is something that you can study scientifically, right? Language is not just your 7th grade teacher yelling at you about how to do the punctuation right. Language is actually an important human thing, and as an important human thing, we have to do science on it. How do people learn it? How do people process it? What are you thinking with it? How is it in the head? These are our kinds of questions, and we study them scientifically. We also want people to know that there are trustworthy people like us who do this. Trustworthy people who, for instance, if you had a question about language, or how language worked, or what language policy should be, you might want to come and ask, because we actually do have evidence-based information. We actually have thought a lot about these questions. We actually know a lot about language. And hopefully we're trustworthy, and that means that we could be a resource for people to think about how language works. To give you a tiny idea about what we do, these are some of our topics that are not research-based. These are just educational activities. And I use these because they show the complete breadth of what language is and how we approach it. So all the way over there, we have So-Min Kim from the School of Education, EDUTL, Teaching and Learning. And she is doing an activity that helps people understand the strategies that children use when they learn words. And she does it by teaching people a couple of words in Korean. For most people at COSI, that turns them into a child. They don't know Korean, but after we work with her, they use word learning strategies, and they know at least 3 words. So we teach a little bit of Korean. In the middle, we have, so sorry, dear, we have Dr. Rachel Fresh-Holt, during one of our activities, she's an audiologist, so she cares about things like how hearing works and how we hear speech silence. And this was an activity where we talk about the fact that there are hair cells inside the ear that actually can break if you play really loud noises into them. So turn down your headphones because they're bad for you. So this is about thinking about how hearing works and how we process speech sounds auditorially. This is Abby Sarver. She was an undergraduate, actually, in the anthropology department, anthropology major. She's actually gone on to do museum studies, so she actually works on making museum exhibits now, another feature of our lab. And this is one she made for us on Mayan writing systems and helping people sort of understand the ways that you can represent what language looks like, using something that people have lots of stereotypes about, and most of those stereotypes are actually wrong. Turns out they're all syllables. It's amazing. So these are the kinds of things that we do on the floor. We train our students to do these activities. We happily will teach anybody we can that language science is cool, and he's a cool part of it. Now this is awesome, right? I go around all over when I'm talking to students about how we want to do this and why it's important, but you really might want to know whether or not it works. Right? It's a really good story, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't actually matter if it's a good story. So we are scientists, so we do care whether it works. So we tested it, right? We did an experiment. We actually done a series of experiments on different ones of our activities to find out, are we accomplishing our goals when we're out of the language pod? So do we get people interested in language science when they do our stuff? Are we generating interest and excitement? We're also particularly interested in whether we put the science in language science for people, right? Are we getting people to think that language is something you can study scientifically? This is one of our big goals. We want to know if we do it. So I'm going to tell you about one of our studies doing an evaluation of does it work? And it's the IP or name tag intervention. We're going to call it an intervention because, we're intervening with our very cool activity about IPA name tags. So what we do is we're going to compare the attitudes between people at COSI who did our activity, the intervention group, and people who did not do our activity, the baseline controls. Now, our intervention is not like, there's no drug for this, right? We're not going to pump you up with language science. Instead, what we're going to do is give you a favorite activity of ours, which is a name tag in the International Phonetic Alphabet. So I'm sorry for all of you who were misled into thinking I was about to talk about beer. I'm not. I'm going to talk about the International Phonetic Alphabet. All right, so that is what it looks. That's a little slice of it over there. That's the what the IPA looks like. Let me give you a tiny flavor of what it feels like to be in this intervention. I want you to imagine that you've come to COSI and you're hanging out, and imagine you're the crew cat. We did, in fact, have the crew cat come and visit us and get an IPA name tag, so based on a true story. Not actually part of the intervention study, though. That crew cat was, purely promotional. But imagine you're the crew cat. And for this intervention, we would start by saying, hey, what's your name? And you're the crew cat. So you say, I'm the crew cat. Okay, and we say, cool, crew cat. I want to actually listen really closely to your name. Let's listen, hello, to the sounds in your name. So when you say you're the crew cat, what is that sound there at the beginning of your name? It's a k sound. Now, what was the letter you used to write that? If you're crew cat, you used a C to write that letter, but the sound is actually a K sound. So let's do think a little bit about that, how you can compare that C to that K sound. And what I'm writing your name tag is that. Now, this is a symbol that you're probably familiar with, right? Oh, sorry. It's a symbol you're probably familiar with from English, and you can ask, well, what sound normally goes with this one? Oh, yeah, the K sound typically goes with this. So how come I'm going to do this one when you used a C? Well, we could ask, what other sounds sometimes go with the C letter? So I might say, yes, what? Yes? Very good. This is not rocket science. Thank you for knowing. You have funds of knowledge, right? Right, so if the word is Cincinnati, you're going to go that the C is going to give you a sound. So that letter is actually going to be complicated. It's going to go with, it goes to different sounds. As it turns out, right, the sound k also goes to different letters, because sometimes in English it goes to this one and sometimes it goes to a C. But in the International Phonetic Alphabet, the world is much cleaner. In the International Phonetic Alphabet, there's a one-to-one correspondence between the sounds and the letters. So k, we go with this. I can do this all the way around. We're going to end up with a name tag that's going to say crew cat, and it's going to look a lot like this. Yes? Yeah, okay. It's going to look a lot like this. We have key discussion points that go with this. I just gave you probably the first big one, which is that in English there's mismatches between the sounds and the letters, right? That's a well-known problem with English, right? And if you've ever done anything with spelling, you are aware that the spelling in English does not always do what you want it to do, right? So we talk about that, and crew cat, you have a nice example of that. We talk about how you make sounds. Right, so it turns out the International Phonetic Alphabet, if you look at it, it's when you write it out, the chart for it is actually organized around how your mouth actually does make sounds. So k is actually a sound you make at the back of your throat, and it's on one side of the IPA. S is actually something you make further up in your mouth. So you can try it if you want to. Go k, s, k, s. You can actually feel your tongue going back and forth. Right, that is about how we make sounds. So this is actually an instrument you have, and it's very cool. Makes a lot of different sounds, and these are critical for language, spoken language. We can also talk about how language scientists like to use the IPA. So one thing you might notice here in CrewCat is that there's this funny upside down R here that we use for crew. You're like, why do we have to use a funny upside down R? Well, one of the reasons is because lots of languages in the world have an R sound, but they don't actually all sound quite the same. And we want to respect the fact that, say, the R, if you anybody speaks Spanish, a little Spanish, right? Crew, I mean, you would say it differently. The R would be pronounced differently, and the IPA wants to represent that, wants to represent the fact that it sounds different, whether or not you would spell it differently. So bottom line is we got sort of two key messages. Number one message with a bullet for us is letters are a way of writing sounds. Letters are not sounds themselves. Right? So a lot of people will think about this, they get hung up on the letters. Letters are just a way of writing it down. Language is in the sound, spoken language at least. We can take up sign language later, I'm happy to, it's very interesting. But for spoken language, it's the sounds that are gonna matter, not how you write them down. And then language scientists care about the IPA because we really care about the sounds and what they actually are. Right? So there's lots of languages in the world, and we want to be able to sort of be responsible to all those languages. We also want to be responsible to all the dialects of our own language. If you want to be accurate to that kind of stuff, you have to care about the sounds. If you're going to care about the sounds, you need a tool that you can use that will help you get those sounds down just the way they are. How does this give us, how am I going to be respectful when I do this? All right, let's give you some funds of knowledge. You already have some of this. Everybody who speaks, who can read and write English is familiar with the fact that it's a mess, right? This is a Dr. Seuss book, right? The tough cough says he plows the dough. Fun times, right? So the letter sound correspondences in English are complex, shall we say. So this is a nice word because it helps people sort of understand that there's a distinction between what you're actually saying and what you're going to write down. How do we use it to generate interest and excitement? Well, I mean, it's a name tag. It's about your name. There is actually nothing more interesting to most people than getting to talk about their own name, right? So getting to spend some time talking with people about their own name, people who've misspelled their name, what they like about their name. This is great. And plus you get a name tag at the end. So it's a fun game. One of our favorite demos, we've been doing this demo for ages. People love doing the demo. Our impression is that people love receiving this demo. Does it work? Is it going to do what we want it to do? So here's your science part. There are methods. So in our intervention group, we have 117 adult museum visitors, and they do a scripted version of this, so it's a little bit more tailored so that we can make sure everybody gets the same talking points. We do it right on the floor of COSI, and then when they're done with it, you fill out a survey about all kinds of things, about how much you liked about it, what you learned about it, how do you feel about the language science, a whole bunch of things. we compare these people to 543 baseline controls. These are lovely people at COSI who just never did the IPA demo, right? We just find people and we make them do that survey without having them do the IPA. So we find out what they're like when they haven't done our intervention. How do they do? Well, first the question is, do they learn anything? Are they interested? About half of people will explicitly say they learned something they thought was interesting or worthwhile. This is not counting stuff like how much do they smile and laugh and whatever and those kinds of things. This is, did they actually end up thinking this was cool? About half of them do. When we ask what did they learn, these are all things that we think you could learn from getting this demo. You could learn about how sounds work. You could learn about how writing systems work. You could learn about the IPA in particular. You could learn about cross-linguistic applications, like how do we use it in other languages. One at the top we call the critical take-home message. This is the one that I just said. Sounds and the letters are different. Not that many people actually give us all the way to something that we really thought was sounds and letters are different, but lots of people are giving us things about how sounds work and about how letters work and how all this goes together. So they do okay on the whole from all this. The part that gets me super excited is this one. In our survey, we have a lot of questions that are asking basically, are different dimensions of language things you can study scientifically? And the way we ask people, we ask them questions like, do scientists study it? Do they do experiments? Are there new things you could find out about this? And we ask about a lot of different parts of language, since after all, language is not just the study of child language acquisition, it's the study of many different things. So this is one question that we yanked out of that, which is, can you do experiments to study this topic? Right, so that's, if you say yes to that, that's pre-sciencey, pro-science. And we actually asked about different dimensions of language science. So can you do experiments to study poetry? Could you do experiments to study dialect? Could you do experiments to study audiology? Now the gray bars are those people who never talk to us about the IPA. So that's just sort of what your average person at COSI thinks is true. Cool. The exciting part are the red bars. So the red bars are the same question to people who just finished doing our IPA demo, intervention, and you'll notice that all of the red bars are higher than the gray bars. So just spending some time with us learning about the IPA makes people more likely to think that you could study poetry with an experiment, more likely to think you could study dialect with an experiment, tiny bit more likely to think you could study hearing and audiology with an experiment. One of the open class items that we got from participants was, I guess it opens my mind to the types of scientists out there, which would be like exactly what we want them to come away with, the thinking that, oh yeah, okay, scientists, not just bio and chem, scientists study language, poetry, dialect, stuff like that. So this makes us very happy, makes me extremely happy. But I do want to talk a tiny bit, good, because I'm like, almost at time, about impact of all of this. So those red bars were all higher than those gray bars, I promise you. Statistically significant and everything, we got the paper published, it was fine. But it wasn't like 0 to 100, right? We didn't actually move people like that. We moved people like this. It's a relatively small amount that we moved them. And you might ask, well, is that big enough to care about? Right? Is that, I mean, how much did you do? Really? Statistically significant and all, but how much did you really do? And it isn't everything. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It wasn't everything, and we did the 6-7 either. It wasn't everything, but I do want to point out one thing, which is that the LPR intervention takes about 6 minutes to do on the floor of COSI. So we didn't get people from 0 to 100. But then anyway, we only spent about 6 minutes with them talking about how to spell their name in the International Phonetic Alphabet. What this really all comes down to is the idea that if we're going to change the way people think about science, and if we're going to change the way they trust science and what counts as a science, it's going to take time, right? It's not like people very rarely have these sort of massive epiphany moments where I can corner you for a minute and I can transform you. You move people by tiny bits. Every little thing that you do, 6 minutes at a time, you move them up those bars, one step at a time. You move them in terms of trust, you move them in terms of the methods, you move them a tiny bit over a long period of time. And I would be honest with you, sometimes when like we talk about this, people are like, it's a drop in the bucket, people. You're just putting one drop in the bucket with this. And I would say, yeah, it is just a drop in the bucket. But this is why we need to have all of our students doing it and all of our scientists doing it, as many people as possible adding their drop to the bucket, because of course, individually they may be one drops, but together we are an ocean and we can change the way that people think about science if we do it together. All right, last thing, continue thank yous. Obviously, thank you to the Ohio State University. They have been wonderful about funding all kinds of things. Thank you to COSI. They are the best hosts ever. They are amazing, and they've been terrific with us. Special shout out to the National Science Foundation. The National Science Foundation has been our dominant funder for both the research we do inside of the pod. Many of us have received National Science Foundation funding for that, as well as for the training that we do for students, as well as for the evaluation study that you just heard of. If you think research like this is important, may I encourage you to contact your representatives at a national level and tell them that they should consider continuing funding the National Science Foundation at high levels. This is the kind of stuff that they fund. Again, and the last thing is just, if you like me and you like our pod and you like what we're doing, we have a development fund. Feel free to give us money. We'll always take it. And thank you for your attention. I appreciate it. Okay.
Okay, so we can take some questions for Professor Wagner. Let's see. Very enthusiastic person in the middle. Go ahead. Yeah.
I guess when you talk about the ITA activity and the questionnaire, it seemed like you did the questionnaire right after the activity.
We did.
Have you done any research on like the long-term impacts of things like this?
We have not done, no. Our short answer is, yeah, really no. We have tried, I'm sorry. I will repeat the question. Sorry, the question was, the ITA intervention was our measures were short-term, right? So we gave people a survey immediately after, and our changes immediately after are different from what other people had, but does it last? Right? If we asked them a month later, would we still have it? If we asked them a year later, would we still have it? The short answer is we haven't done it yet. We have been playing around with some things to try to get people to give us long-term responses. And I'll be honest with you, people are terrible. We try to hold them to postcards, right? Where we give them postcards and we're like, come back to our survey or whatever. We would send a postcard later and be like, remember doing this? Come and do a survey. Yeah, and that didn't work. So we are still working on like the best ways to do this. One of the features at COSI, right, is that people come and go, and lots of people come and go, but we don't have a long-term relationship with them particularly. So creating that long-term relationship is something we're still working on figuring out how to do. But boy, I hope so. I don't know for sure. I do have one thing I can add though. For the students who work with us, we have done it. So students who've worked with us, we've actually gone back to them, a year later, 2 years later, and asked them about how did you feel about doing all this stuff. It still works for them. Right? So students who actually are the ones doing these demos, a year later will say, wow, this was really important for my life, it changed my life. So I know it helps the students. I can't speak to whether it helps people at COSI though.
Okay, Miss O'Leary, go ahead. Yep, that's you.
So I was wondering, when you study, especially children and knowledge about it, do you take into consideration that some of them have different cognitive levels and they might have a higher repetitive and others?
I just met you, didn't I? Okay, so I just met this young lady at COSI yesterday when we were setting up a study. So the question is, when we do studies with children on language development, do we take into consideration things like what their cognitive level is, what their level of vocabulary is, things like that? The answer is yes, we do. And we do in a couple of ways. We do this just the way that you do it in a lab on campus. So one way we do it is for some of the studies, we use age as what we call a proxy measure, right? So older kids generally have bigger vocabularies and are smarter than younger kids. So that's one thing we always get lots of age information. But for some of the studies, we really do care a lot about things like what dialects do you speak? Or what's your vocabulary size? Or like things like that, in which case we measure it. So we actually will often ask parents very detailed and specific information about where children are from, where they've traveled to. We've often used checklist different kinds of vocabulary measures. Sometimes we use cognitive tests to find out what they can do. I'm staring at the people right now, by the way, who are the people who do, many of the people who do these sorts of things and have these sorts of tests. So wow, we try. I don't think that we ever capture everything, but we try to get, if it matters to us, we try.
Sir, in the middle, yeah.
Thank you, friend. Thank you for your interesting talk.
Thank you.
As you're talking in English and showing things on your slide in English, you've had a person
I know.
now next to you talking in some other ways. Are you all studying in linguistics also the different sign languages?
Thank you for that question. So the question was, do we ever study sign language? Things like this. You're asking the right person because yes, I do. Some of the, we do sort of a wide range of things. One of the studies we did, in fact, last summer was actually looking at people's attitudes towards ASL and whether they thought it would be easy or hard to learn. And then we would teach people 3 signs in ASL, and we would judge them. They didn't tell them like that. But we actually rated how well they did the signs. And we were interested in whether the way we would teach them the signs mattered. And it does. It's cool. Right. So if you teach people signs in a very story-like way, like the sign for cold is like shiver and near the blanket around you, people think they're great at it and they remember it, but when you ask them to produce it, they're meh. But if you teach them where to put their hands, you say, you're gonna put your hands like this, you're gonna put your arms like that, you're gonna move like this. They think it's really hard, but they do it right. So we've been, so this is very research I actually do in collaboration with people at Gallaudet University, which is a large school of devoted to deaf education in the United States. So we're really interested in things like what are the best ways to teach ASL and how can we change people's attitudes about ASL.
Miss, over on the side.
I was really interested. Can you change someone's opinion about like science and the scientific process that they're so stuck in the?
I use a friends on a much motor skill that would not change their opinions about anything, no matter how many times I tell them. I'm just wondering if there's like a psychological aspect.
Okay, so I'm an optimist.
Okay, let's
So I'm
repeat it.
Okay, so the question, thank you. Thank you. I need the reminder every time. So the question is, are there people who are never going to change their minds, right? Are there people who are so stuck in their ways it can't be done, no matter what you say to them? And I will tell you, I'm an optimist. So I believe that anyone can in fact be changed. Here's the trick. No one is going to be changed with just one conversation, and no one is going to be changed if you yell at them. Right? So one of the big problems that many of us have, I mean, and you can do it with your own family members, that's cool, right? That if you like yell at people and you're like, dude, that's wrong, right? People, you know what, how do you feel when someone says it to you? You're like, huh, no, I'm not, and I'm not listening to you anymore. So taking the really confrontational attitude actually goes against change. That's like the deficit model on like mega steroids, to be not only throwing the information, but throwing it with shade. So if you do that, you are very unlikely to change people. And in fact, what it does is it makes people feel like you're not someone they can listen to for a lot of things. This is where the funds of knowledge stuff comes in. So the way you try to change people is millimeter by millimeter, right? You got to think of this as a really long-term game, right? So, we're against vaccines, but you can, right? You just start going after it, and there's all the politics involved. You say, if you find out what really matters to them, I mean, for some people, what matters to them about vaccines is the fact that some of them do have side effects, and they worry about that. So you can think about that. Well, side effects are something that happen to a lot of things, and it doesn't have to be overall that it's not going to work. And you can think about, maybe there's some people where it's a, trade-off. Well, you can try to move them this much. Yeah, it's really, like I say, it can be very frustrating. You only get one drop at a time. Focus on the drops, hope that over time it actually amounts to something. I don't know if it helps, but that's where I'm optimistic.
Okay, good. Ma'am in the back, go ahead.
Do you have any impact on other departments in MOSU that are involved with science educators? Do you work with the education department building at other levels, maybe starting for grade school and moving like high school and then your college?
Awesome, thank you. So the question is whether or not we connect with other people doing science education on campus and reaching out to science educators in different ways. I will say we do have strong ties to the School of EDUTL, Education, Teaching, and Learning. A member of our executive board is Dr. Leslie Moore. She actually helped design our training course that we use with the students, so she's definitely had a lot to say about that. One that we haven't, we have focused primarily on training college students. We do programming with high school students on a limited basis. We haven't done much with teacher training. We haven't done things like that. We're up for it. We're up for anything. But so, I mean, OSU, as you know, is a very large institution, lots of ins and outs to connecting with things. So we have a nice line into education where we haven't done everything that could be done over there. Do you want to talk?
Go ahead.
Kind of goes off first, but thinking about when there's other relevant data out there that might be sharing with others who might be perceived negatively, like thinking of global warming is at the.
Sure.
We talked a little bit about getting positive or positive engagement. How you share with others, how you share data that they perceive.
Controversial? Okay, so the question is, how do you handle controversial topics? So luckily, we're linear scientists, so I have to do global warming. But I do have to deal with things, probably the most controversial topic that we honestly talk about is dialect. There's lots of people out there in the world that have ideas that the way that you speak is not just a reflection of like who you are, who your friends are, or where you're from, but is genuinely a reflection of things like your level of intelligence and whether you're a nice person, whether you're a capable person. That's a pretty common kind of set of attitudes that lots of people have. We have people in the lab who've studied that, and we do education around like, how does this work? And we do sometimes hit people who are like, well, right, those dumb people, or something that we're like, no, that is not at all what we want you to walk away with. We do a couple of things. One thing that we do very strongly in doing, and it would apply to global warming as well, is that we always represent what we think is the best science. So we're here to be trustworthy people. We're here to represent the best science. We talk about things in the way we think is most accurate and most appropriate. When people come back at us and they say, yes, but, you silly people, I have my lived experience, and they offer something, and we're like, oh, okay, that's a terrible thing, and it's actually got societal bad ramifications, and it's no good. We actually take kind of a funds of knowledge approach when we say, basically, it's the acknowledge, I hear what you're saying, I understand a lot of people feel that way. But scientists have actually found that, pick one other fact and talk about it that way. And then what we try to do is move to something where people have common ground, right? So we never try to endorse anything that we would actually say is wrong. We really try not to do that. But there is often common ground on any topic, right? So global warming, well, we can all agree that the weather's been very weird, right? Maybe we disagree about why that's been happening. Maybe we disagree on what you should do about it. We could all agree that that's something that we care about, and we all care about paying attention to it. So maybe we bring it back to something we can both agree on. In our case, we can all agree that, we all have our very own special ways of talking, and that's, we can agree on that, even if we don't agree on the rest of it. Again, it's not wholly satisfying. I'll be honest with you, right? It's because you really want to do to some of these people is be like in their face, no, wrong, come on, right? We want to do that, and my students are allowed to get that out in the classroom situation, right? We're allowed to vent as much as we want about whatever people are going to say in the classroom. But on the floor at COSI, We're not there to confront people. We're not there to rail her out. We are there to move you millimeter by millimeter. And so sometimes that just means saying, I'm a scientist and I don't agree with you, but I understand where you're coming from. And I see that we have some common ground right over here. And the hope is that they now have seen that there's someone you could talk to. You can't change minds if they won't talk to you. So you want them to be someone they can talk to. It's not wholly satisfying, I grant you, but like I said, this enterprise is one where you have to feel long-term to be satisfied.
Okay, let's take one more question. Glasses guy.
How does this go?
Utah native, how do you differentiate between phonetics and dialect? Utah, we don't like to pronounce our T's. That's a very well-known thing.
You do that. You do you. So the question was about phonetics versus dialect, and so phonetics or phonology is that way of describing the sounds and what you do. If it's a dialect, that means it's going to be sort of connected to a system and usually connected to some social dimension, right? So you might, I might ask, here, let's put it, the most extreme version I can imagine, right? You had dental work and you've just come from the dentist. Most of us pronounce things quite funny when we're like, done up on Novocaine, right? So I could describe that phonetically, what happens to you when you're doped up on Novocaine. But you don't want to say that's my dialect in any respect, right? Because that's not something that's part of a system. It's not me being part of a connected social group. It's just something that turns out to happen when you get Novocaine. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Things like dropping T's, that is a phonetic feature that is common to many dialects. For me, that's a question of how you describe that it is versus whether it's part of the system. Does that make sense? Okay, cool.
Okay, so I have a question for you. How would you like to have a chance to talk to the speaker, have a cookie and a coffee?
Cookies.
Let's do that. It's in the traditions room upstairs, and we'll see you there.
Thank you.